Hey guys, so I decided to try something a little different with my PvP video. We'll see how you like it. This is going to be the accompanying guide where I give you my gear, build, attributes, and probably most importantly tactics, which you can then judge for yourself and adapt how you want. Enjoy! Okay, so first off, my abilities. So we have Dark Cloak. This is your panic button. You can use it multiple times and escape your foes. It also removes damage over time spells, which is useful, and can get you out of Dragon Knight's talons. It can also give your heals a breather, so they can catch back up. It's also a great spell for positioning, because you can move away or behind people if they get too close, which is a lot more important than you'd think. I believe this is one of Nightblade's great strengths in PvP, and when you're using it, you do feel like you're playing a Nightblade, so it's a lot of fun. And then we have Immovable Brute. So this is pretty much a must-have for PvP. It makes you immune to all disabling effects for 8 seconds. Keep this up at all times if you can. It also increases your defenses by a ton, making you much more tanky, and it soft caps those stats as well. The morph is pretty useless, but it does give some extra resistance, so your call. Then we have Leeching Strikes. So this ability restores all 3 stats for every light or heavy attack that you do. It's a wonderful survivability tool, and it adds sustainability to your damage. It definitely go for the Leeching Strikes morph for the healing, and since it's a toggled ability, you'll see this appear on both bars, because you don't want to waste precious seconds switching between bars, or I mean toggling it on and off. And then we have Funnel Health, which is the old standby. This is your main DPS ability, and it's weaved or animation cancelled with light attacks. The other morph might be a little better for PvP, but you'll probably want the Funnel Health morph anyways, because, well, you want it for PvE DPS. But the funnel also works with you, works well in groups. And then Inner Light. This one's probably going to be controversial. People usually argue that crit is useless in PvP because Impenetrable cancels it out. Well, yes and no. Most people aren't fully geared out in PvP gear, and a lot of the time that crit will still benefit you. That 20% crit will equal about 10% extra DPS, which is pretty great. But that's not even the reason I slot it. The reason I slot it is because it lets you see stealth enemies. Big deal, right? I beg to differ. Everyone uses stealth in PvP, and I can't tell you the number of times where I've found random people, or people were about to gank me and I saw them before. It's just saved me a bunch of times, and I would recommend that you at least try it. Now for the Bar 1 Ultimate. Another old standby, Veil of Blades. It's as useful in PvP as it is in PvE. If someone's standing it, they're probably going to die, and along with that you get 60% less damage taken and a 70% snare. It's just amazing. For the consumables, I use the standard tripods, which restore all 3 stats, and they help add more survivability and more sustainability to what you're doing. So then for Bar 2, we have Mutagen, which is your main heal. And it comes along with its own little burst heal when you fall below 20% health, which is useful. And then we have Leeching Strikes and Inner Light again, like I said, because you don't want to toggle them on and off every time. And then we have Mass Hysteria. So this is an awesome ability that you'll be using pretty often. It's a 4.5 second fear, and it's used to create space and create a window of opportunity for harder opponents, so you can DPS them down, and it's especially useful for tanks. Then we have kind of a utility slot. So here I have Shadow Image. It's a great utility skill. It should be popped against any tanks or harder opponents. It can be used to move around the battlefield with the teleport, and it can really confuse your opponents. Quick Siphon and Ward Ally also could work in this slot, but I usually prefer Shadow Image, especially for duels and taking on tanks. And then the Bar 2 Ultimate is Incapacitating Strike. once again, to take down healers or tanks. Use it when they're low HP to reduce the healing by 50%, and then you can DPS them down. If you have lower health, it also gives a nice 3.5 second stun. Alright, so now for my attributes. Basically, I have 49 points in health because you want the most survivability as possible. And then I have, for my food, I use fortified sweet rolls, which are magicka and health. And then for Mundus Stone, I use the mage for more magicka because it's the main resource we're going to use, and I'm not going to stack crit chance just because it can be mitigated. And just note that this spell damage is with Leeching Strikes turned on. And yeah, so then for my gear, I have a 5-piece Warlock set. So I have the body Warlock, I have the hat Warlock, and I have the jewelry Warlock. And then I have a 5-piece White Strike set with Impenetrable, and it's enchanted with magicka. And this might seem weird, but it makes you a lot more tanky because it gives you 900 damage point shield every 15 seconds if you need it when you drop below 30%. And that's pretty significant, and it's part of the reason I can just keep recovering after they beat on me for a while. Makes you really hard to kill. It's awesome, and it does really well versus burst DPS. For my jewelry, I enchant all of it for spell damage, and for the staffs, I use 2 identical resto staffs with the hardening enchantment and the sharpening trait, which increases spell penetration. That's better in PvP as the crit can be mitigated a bit. Tactics. So with this build, it's all about slow and steady wins the race. You are meant to outlast your opponents, and this tanky PvP style works very well in ESO, seeing as nearly all duelists are tanks. The steady part is especially important, since this build relies on getting hits on your opponent to heal and regen your stats through Leeching Strikes. You gotta keep the pressure on your opponents, and you aren't going to be blocking the whole time like other builds. Blocking is basically going to be saved for when you can anticipate a big attack like Crystal Frags or Ambush. Sneaking will drain your stamina really fast, so use it sparingly. Most of the time you can just be running around with Inner Light and Immovable, and this means that you won't be afraid to start a fight out of stealth. Just keep Leeching Strikes and Inner Light toggled on at all times, and Mutagen and Immovable should be kept up constantly, or as much as you can. Although if your foe is almost dead, attacking takes precedence over Immovable. Weave your light attacks with Funnel Health or Swallow Soul for your damage. And if you are getting too much incoming damage, then Dark Cloak and let your healing catch up. Now for some special considerations. So for burst builds, they're simple. Just block, or if you can, Dark Cloak or Fear them, and they'll be easy pickings. White Strike should keep you alive for whatever they can throw at you. And then we have melee DPS builds. DPS builds for me are kind of sustained high damage, but not quite burst levels. So Shadow Image and Mass Hysteria are your friends here. Use the Fear and Cloak to keep as much space as possible and just burn them down. For ranged DPS builds, you want to do the opposite, so you want to stay as close as possible to them and try to stay behind them to avoid damage. Cloak is really great for this because you can pop out and pop back in right behind them. Now tanks. This is by far the hardest build type to take down. You need to use all your tools on hand. So stay as far away as possible to start. Use Shadow Image, Shadow Image and Dark Cloak for positioning. Beat on them for a while, and that'll drain their stamina from blocking. And then you run in and fear them, so they can't break free, and that gives you a window opportunity to kill them. You really want to conserve mana. You don't need to spam Funnel Health the whole time. Save it for when it really counts. If they get low on HP, then use Incapacitating Strike to chop away half of their healing, and this allows you to take them down. You can also use it as an execute. Now, taking on groups of enemies, you're going to want to drop Veil and drop it early. If the incoming damage is becoming too overwhelming, pop Cloak and get as much space between you and them as possible. Try to kind of string the group along the landscape so that only the front two can really hit you, one or two can really hit you. And you're going to be using your Fear, your Cloak, and some kiting skills to do this. But you should be able to survive. Don't block too much when too many people are attacking you, because it'll really kill your stamina fast, and with more than one person, immovable is much more important than blocking one attack. And whatever you do, don't stop attacking. You need to down the people as quickly as possible, and you need the heals and regen from leeching strikes.